They said he never missed, but no one ever found the proof. The surgeon, a ghost whispered about in police basements and mafia boardrooms. No blood, no weapon, no corpse, just absence. For years, the world dismissed him as a myth. But myths don't leave surgical gloves at crime scenes. What if the man pulling the trigger wasn't the real threat? What if his scalpel carved order from chaos itself? Tonight, beneath the flicker of a broken street light in Naples, the legend becomes flesh. And when the shadows clear, the only thing left behind is silence. The city wakes to whispers. No gunfire, no witnesses, yet another man has vanished. The media calls it the cleanest hit in history. Police tape stretches across empty streets, but the morgue has no body to tag. In a world built on fear and greed, silence is the loudest weapon. And somewhere in the quiet, the surgeon watches his own legend grow. At Europol headquarters, Alana replays grainy footage, frame by frame. A blur of black fabric, a reflection in glass. That's all they have. But she feels it. This isn't a normal hitman. Each victim disappears as if dissected from existence. Whoever the surgeon is, he's not killing for money. He's erasing something, or someone, from history. Luca Renard, the journalist, begins tracing the same trail. He interviews terrified witnesses, all speaking of a man who left no footprints. Every story ends the same way, with a surgical glove and silence. Luca doesn't believe in ghosts, but this one seems to believe in him. In an abandoned warehouse outside Rome, the surgeon prepares his tools in perfect symmetry. Every blade, every clamp, gleams like a priest's relics. He works alone, precise and unshaken. Somewhere far away, another name has just been added to his list. The operation has begun, and the world hasn't realized it's already on the table. Before he became the surgeon, he was a medic, patching up soldiers in a war that chewed through men like dust. He saved lives, not knowing he was learning how to take them apart. War doesn't end when the gunfire stops. It just changes its tools. When he came home, the hospitals were quieter, but the dead still followed him. He didn't pick up a scalpel again for years, until someone paid him to use it differently. The first time he killed, it wasn't murder. It was mercy. A cartel enforcer, half dead, begging to be finished. The surgeon obliged. One clean incision, no pain, no trace. Word spread through the underworld. There was a man who could make problems disappear. They didn't call him a killer yet. They called him efficient. Soon, death became a business. For every ghost city left behind by war, a buyer waited with a suitcase full of cash. But the surgeon didn't kill like the others. No chaos, no bloodlust. His operations were clinical, controlled, beautiful in their horror. He studied anatomy not from books, but from life and from death. One night in Geneva, a banker turned up missing, along with every trace of a billion-dollar arms deal. No struggle, no body. Just a white envelope containing a hospital sterilization seal. That was the night Europol gave him a name. The surgeon. Luca Renard's articles turned whispers into wildfire. Every story added another ghost to the surgeon's legend. But something changed. The victims were no longer criminals. Politicians, scientists, spies, all vanishing with surgical precision. Luca asked one question he couldn't shake. What if the surgeon isn't killing for them anymore? What if he's cleaning the world? The surgeon didn't belong to one organization. He worked for all of them, and for none. Cartels, intelligence agencies, oligarchs, they each believed they owned him. But he was only renting them time. His kills were not for money. They were messages written in the language of absence, and the underworld was starting to read between the lines. Some called him a weapon, others a myth. But to the syndicate, he was insurance. He never met his clients directly. Files arrived in coded form. Medical terms describing death as a procedure. Patient requires extraction. Tissue removal scheduled. He performed each mission like an operation. Clean, clinical, invisible, but even perfection has a pulse. The surgeon began choosing his own targets. Bankers who laundered blood money, politicians who sold weapons masked as aid. Each death looked random, but the pattern was there. A network collapsing, one cut at a time. It wasn't rebellion, it was evolution. Europol's investigation hit a wall. Elena Voss knew she wasn't chasing a hitman anymore. She was tracing a disease spreading through global corruption. Every missing person led to another revelation. The surgeon wasn't hunting targets. He was performing an autopsy on power itself. Then came the message. A single word carved into the marble desk of a murdered arms dealer. Cured. It was the surgeon's handwriting. That was when every major syndicate realized they weren't hiring him anymore. They were next on his list. The ghost they built had learned to haunt its creators. By the time the case reached its 4th year, Inspector Elena Voss had lost count of the bodies that weren't there. No witnesses, no DNA, no mistakes. She'd built her career on patterns. But the surgeon was pure chaos wrapped in precision. And yet, his silence was starting to sound like purpose. Somewhere in the static of Deadman's phones, she began to hear his rhythm, and it was getting closer. The deeper she dug, the stranger the truth became. The victims weren't random. They were connected through offshore accounts, medical research firms, and war contracts. The surgeon wasn't chasing power. He was dissecting it. Elena realized she wasn't just hunting a killer. She was tracing a cure. Then came the file. No return address. Inside, detailed autopsy reports on people who were officially still alive. Each file bore the same signature. A surgeon's insignia burned into the corner. Whoever sent it wanted her to know. He was inviting her into the operation. Across town, Luca Renard was following his own lead. Every country he visited, someone disappeared right after he arrived. At first, he thought it was coincidence, until he realized the surgeon was using him as a map. The assassin was moving through Luca's investigation, cleaning as he went. Then came the night the hunter became the bait. Elena's phone buzzed with an anonymous message. One line only. Operation complete. Room 213. When she kicked the door open, the air was sharp with antiseptic. On the floor, a briefcase full of surgical tools. And taped to the wall a note written in blood-red ink. You're next to see the cure. The surgeon had started erasing his own employers. One by one, the men who once pulled his strings were vanishing. CEOs, bankers, crime lords, gone without a trace. The world called it collapse. He called it cleansing. Each death left behind no chaos, no message. Just silence that grew louder with every disappearance. Elena traced the disappearances to a list of global executives, all of them connected to the same syndicate that had once employed him. She realized he wasn't killing to hide secrets. He was eliminating the infection at its source. But if he was cleaning the world, who would cleanse him? Luca Renard finally understood the surgeon's message. It wasn't murder. It was surgery on a dying world. Every target had poisoned governments, armed rebels, sold chaos. The surgeon was cutting out rot, one incision at a time. But to expose the truth, Luca would have to survive long enough to tell it. The syndicate panicked. They turned their own soldiers on him, but the surgeon was always 3 steps ahead. Every assassin they sent simply disappeared. Europol surveillance captured only empty rooms, flickering monitors, and surgical gloves placed neatly on chairs. Trophies of a silent war. Then, without warning, all signals stopped. No more killings, no more clues. The surgeon had vanished again, but this time he'd taken the entire syndicate with him. Elena watched the global market crumble overnight. She didn't know whether to call it justice or judgment. Somewhere out there, a man with a scalpel had rewritten the balance of power, and no one could undo his operation. The world called it the Black Silence, A week when power vanished overnight. Servers shut down, accounts emptied, governments stalled. No one could trace the source, but every system showed the same anomaly. Surgical code signatures, identical to the surgeon's method. He hadn't disappeared. He had gone digital, operating on the world itself. Inspector Elena Voss raced against an invisible clock. The surgeon was no longer cutting flesh. He was dissecting nations. Every financial hub, every covert server, every secret contract was unraveling. It wasn't war. It was sterilization. And the world's most wanted man had become the planet's unseen surgeon. Meanwhile, Luca Renard followed a digital breadcrumb trail across encrypted networks. Every trace led to one final location, a remote medical facility in the Swiss Alps. Its records listed no staff, no patients, only one active file name. Operation Cure, Stage 7, Luca. Realized this wasn't just another kill. It was the surgeon's final procedure. Inside, Alina found him, not hiding but waiting. The surgeon stood before a table, covered in files, names of every person he'd erased. "You came for justice," he said softly, but justice was infected. His voice was calm, surgical, final. For the first time, she saw his face in full light. It wasn't evil staring back. It was mercy. The alarms never sounded. By the time Europol stormed the compound, both were gone. The building was empty, except for one final record playing through the intercom. A heartbeat monitor flatlining into silence, and on the wall, in black marker, a final note. The world has been cured. The surgeon's last operation was complete. Weeks drifted by like static after a broadcast ends. The world was quieter, but not in peace, in suspension. Banks that once ruled economies now stood empty, their executives gone without a trace. Armies awaited orders that would never come. Governments fell to their knees, not through war, but through sudden, inexplicable transparency. Inspector Elena Voss spent her nights scrolling through digital ruins, accounts deleted, records erased, faces forgotten. It was as if the world had been disinfected. Yet, in the silence, she could still feel him. The rhythm of his precision echoing beneath society's new heartbeat. She had hunted monsters her entire life, but none who believed they were medicine. Across the city, Luca Renard typed the final words of his career. His article, The Autopsy of Silence, was less a report and more an autopsy of humanity's grief. He described how corruption had become an organism, how the surgeon's blade had sliced through its arteries, one clean incision at a time. The world would never know who he truly was, but the results were undeniable. The machine had stopped. Lucas' editor begged him to soften it, but he refused. This wasn't journalism. It was truth. He pressed publish, knowing his story might be the next to vanish. And for the first time, he didn't care. Late one night, a soft knock echoed through Elena's apartment. No one stood at the door, just a small brown box wrapped in sterile white paper. Inside, a single surgical glove and a handwritten note. Every cure begins with a cut. She stared at it for what felt like hours. Was it a warning, a confession, or a thank you? Her mind replayed every moment. The alleys, the morgues, the empty chairs. The surgeon hadn't killed her when he had the chance. Maybe he wanted her to see the world he'd built, one purged of its poison. As she slipped the note into her file drawer, she realized she wasn't chasing him anymore. She was guarding his silence. Months later, a satellite caught a faint heat signature deep in the Arctic Circle, the ruins of an old medical outpost long erased from official records. For 48 hours, governments debated whether to send a team. Then the signal vanished, as if swallowed by the snow. Files related to the location disappeared soon after, wiped clean by someone inside the system. Maybe he was alive, maybe not. But one truth settled over every agency, every syndicate, every survivor of his quiet storm. The surgeon had not retired. He had transcended. He'd become the silence that follows after a cure. Invisible, absolute, eternal. History will never say his name. The files are gone, the bodies never found, and every story that spoke of him ends mid-sentence. But legends don't need graves. The surgeon's true operation wasn't on the flesh of the corrupt. It was on the soul of humanity itself. He carved out the infection and left the wound open for the world to heal. Somewhere in the quiet corners of the earth, people whispered that the silence he left behind was sacred, that he had become what he always desired. Absence made pure, and as the snow settled on his final trail, the world took a long, steady breath. The cure, at last, was complete.